Hello, everybody. Back for another movie review, and today is going to be another Christmas classic movie review. It's The Bishop's Wife. Released in 1947, stars the talents of Cary Grant, Loretta Young, and David Niven. And for supporting cast, we have Elsa Lancaster, Monty Woolley, James Gleason, and Gladys Cooper. We also have little trivia, Carolyn Grimes as Debbie, the daughter, who would play Jimmy Stewart's daughter in It's a Wonderful Life. And we also have a young boy who would also play young George Bailey in It's a Wonderful Life. He plays a small part in this film as well, of a little boy who actually kind of bullies Debbie. And I can't think of the guy's name. So the story goes that the bishop is obsessed over having a cathedral built, and he's desperate for money to be raised, and he can't seem to get it raised. And it's taken all of his concentration and not enough of his love and devotion for his wife and his child. One night, he prays to God for help, and in comes Dudley, who happens to be an angel. And hijinks ensue pretty much, and things don't work out for the bishop, but in the end there is a lesson to be learned, and everybody ends up pretty much happy. That is kind of the simple point of the plot. I just wanted to keep it as basic as I could, but I will be going into spoilers. So I will say this used to be one of my all-time favorite Christmas movies. It's still very charming, and I still watch it every year. There are problems I have with it, though, mostly due to the fact that I am a Christian. And there are things that I look at in a different light that bothers me. But that will be later on in the video. Right now, I will focus on the movie itself and the acting. For the most part, the acting is very, very good. Cary Grant is so charismatic and so wonderful as the angel Dudley. He is just so awesome. You just like to be around him. And if you watch the film, you honestly are like, I would love to meet this guy. He just seems like such a down-to-earth, charming fellow. I also love Loretta Young's portrayal of the wife here. She's very plain, but she's very sweet. I honestly always thought that she would make a very good Jane Eyre. Not that I'm knocking her, looks or anything. I do think that she was very lovely. But I thought that with her not having a quote-unquote glamour look, I thought she would be a wonderful Jane Eyre. And ironically, she would do a radio adaptation of Jane Eyre with Orson Welles, who would also star in the 1943 Jane Eyre with Joan Fontaine. But the other one I want to talk about is David Niven. He is just, even though he's supposed to be somewhat unlikable, I believe, at least in the first part of the film, he's not fully unlikable. You do understand to an extent where he's coming from, but at the same time, you see what David Niven brings to the table. He can be very sweet, very charming, and very funny. His facial expressions in this movie is hilarious. And I don't think he gets enough credit for his comedic acting, but then again, I haven't seen too many of his films. I have seen a few, but they are more serious. So I don't know if he's more well-known for serious roles or comedic roles, but I do think he does a fairly well job here. I love the trivia for, checking out, okay, these are the kids for It's a Wonderful Life. It's fun to point that out. I love most of the supporting cast. I'm not a big fan of Elsa Lancaster, but I do love Gleason. And I do love Gladys Cooper. Although in the start of the film, she's kind of like your female version of Scrooge. She wants the cathedral built, but she has to have it the way she wants it. But then later, when she encounters Dudley, again, spoiler alert, when she encounters Dudley, he brings up something that she has hidden that was in her past, and it warms her heart, and she becomes a changed woman. And by the end, she's a totally different character. Gladys Cooper has done many, many films, and she has a full range, I believe. She could play a real mean witch, like in Now Voyager, as Betty Davis's overbearing and judgmental mother, and then play a real sweetheart like Laurence Olivier's sister in Rebecca. Either way, she is such a gem. I also love Woolley's character. He is also a sweetheart. I've also seen him in many other films, but this one is particularly my favorite. He almost could pass up as a Santa Claus, I think, but he's just such a sweetheart, and I can't help but love him in this movie. I also want to talk real quick about the score. The music for The Bishop's Wife was done by Hugo Friedhofer, and he does such an incredible job with the score. It's so sweet, charming, and I just love it, and I listen to it every year. Real quick, I want to talk about one of my favorite scenes in this film. It's where Dudley takes Julia and the cab driver Sylvester ice skating, and there's a particular moment that they do twice that makes me think of The Wizard of Oz. And if you know, and if you've seen this film, you know exactly what I'm talking about. For those who don't, I'm just going to go ahead and say it. They do kind of a Wizard of Oz skip. And it is so adorable and so cute, and they do it on ice skates, for crying out loud. Funny point, my dad and I usually likes to point out that certain parts in that moment are done by stunt doubles and not by the three main actors, Carrie, Loretta, and Gleason. But it's still a charming moment, and I love it. Now that all the good stuff is pretty much well talked about, I want to talk about what bothers me about this film. And if you guys don't want to be around for that, I suggest skipping to this number down below. So my biggest gripe with this movie has to deal with Dudley as the angel. As a Christian, it bothers me that he becomes attached to Julia, because as an angel of God, that wouldn't happen. My thing is, what really gets me is the scene where they go to the little cathedral church to hear the children sing. Henry, who's the bishop, has to go to Gladys Cooper's house in order to make things right for him to get the cathedral built. So he's like, but I will be there. Well, Dudley has a move where he kind of forces Henry to stay at that house by basically gluing him to a chair by force. And to me, that's where Dudley loses me, because if Henry was trying to make an impression and trying to actually spend more time with his wife, then Dudley should have let him, because that is the ultimate lesson. He has to learn that his wife and child mean more to him than the church. So even if it's done by jealousy, it's still something. And the fact that he keeps him there by force makes it wrong, at least in my eyes. And then the fact he takes her on a date afterwards, it just means that Dudley is selfish. And again, an angel of God would not do that. Now, a perfect example of how a classic angel can be done is Clarence from It's a Wonderful Life. He's given the task to help George Bailey, and he does. There's no earthly lust. It is, I am going to help this young man get to where he needs to be and understand the true meaning of his life. And I wish that they kind of would have done this for Dudley here. I think Cary Grant would have done exceptionally well in that kind of a role. He still could have been funny and, you know, still his charming self, but he still could have left off without the human lust of the character. Now, does that mean Cary Grant does a bad job? Absolutely not. I still find him to be very charming. And for most of the film, I still watch it and think he is so good in this role. And I really would love to meet him in real life. As a whole, though, like I said, that is part of why I don't like Dudley. But he does do the right thing by the end of the movie, but he still comes on to Julia right before the actual ending, which upsets Julia and she leaves. That gives Henry the chance to kind of tell him off, and Dudley's like, oh, okay, well, guess what? You have now realized who is more important and what is more important to you, so therefore, my task is done. Again, I feel like they could have done this a lot better without the human lust of the story. I think that, again, they could have made him more like Clarence from It's a Wonderful Life. And ironically, if I'm not mistaken, It's a Wonderful Life came out a year before this one, if I'm not mistaken. Which would make sense because the girl that played Debbie in that film looked younger in It's a Wonderful Life than she does here. Another kind of, it doesn't bother me half as much as it bothers my dad, but there is more of an emphasis on believing in angels. So for example, there is a scene, which is very sweet, where he is telling Debbie the story of David against the lion and protecting his sheep. But he says, well, angels come down and plant ideas into people's heads. That's not the case. If any idea comes from the Lord, it is literally from God himself. And especially as a born-again Christian, I can honestly say that I have had ideas pointed in my head, and I know it is from the Holy Spirit. So there's more emphasis on obeying angels or worshiping angels in a way, without going to, oh my gosh, you have to worship angels. But they do paint angels more in a bigger light here than anything else. Which again, for me, I don't agree with, but it's not one that bothers me as much as the other issue that I had. With that being said, even though I still have some gripes about it, looking at it from a Christian standpoint, I can honestly say that I still watch this every year. It is a beautiful looking film. It is a heartwarming film. And I do recommend you guys go watch it and see for yourselves. There is a version, actually it's just the movie, on YouTube for free. And I highly recommend that you go and check it out if I piqued your interest. And I think that is about it. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments below what you think of The Bishop's Wife. And I hope to see you guys in my next video. Bye. Have a great and wonderful day.